4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. And goal!
Big welcome in, everyone, to the final Bearcat Blitz of 2024. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host across the way there from Rivals Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com, and I'm with Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. Russ Heltman. You can catch the show on whatever podcast platform you frequent, whether that's Spotify, YouTube as well. You can also check us out on Amazon Podcasts, Google, and Apple. YouTube pages, Talking Cats with Russ Heltman for the full video shows twice a week. Ready to start up another week here, a 2-game week for the Bearcats that started off on the wrong foot on the hardwood. 70-67 loss to Kansas State on Monday night. The offense continues to be a problem on the road against good teams, just 127 total points against top 100 KenPom teams on the road so far in 2 games. So obviously not a large sample size there, but we'll get to all that and get to the issues offensively that hampered Cincinnati in their opening Big 12 loss of the season. Before all that, though, got to tell you about our presenting sponsor, the great Bet Online. They continue to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC, head to Bet Online today and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. So, Neil, we'll start with that loss last night to Kansas State, a Kansas State team that Cincinnati was a decent favorite against analytically on ESPN's Basketball Power Index, about a 70+% favorite, and came into the game hovering between a 4-point favorite to a 3.5-point betting favorite. Depending on what sports book you frequented Bet Online, we hope it was kind of hovering around that number there as well. The offense, Neil, we got to start there. It was stagnant, just 11 total assists to 15 turnovers in this game against the Kansas State defense that, yes, is solid, yes, is decent, but is not something that, even though is at home, should have given a team like Cincinnati with the aspirations they have offensively and the way that they were feeling a rise offensively, this many problems. 18 points from Dan Skillings. He had a crazy, uncharacteristic shooting night from outside. 4 of 8 from outside was the biggest part of that 3-point shooting for Cincinnati, to go with Dylan Mitchell as well. Those 2 guys combined for 6 threes after, I think, entering the game with 6 combined threes made on the season. 0 for 2 from Simas Lukosius. That was the big storyline for me, and I'll give the baton to you on that note. 4 points from him, Neil, 2 of 6 shooting, and we had the stat from our good friend at Riverfront Cincy, Ryan Roberts, noted I think it was right after the game last night, was he's like 6 of 27 shooting or something like that in the last couple games.
It is 11 points, 4 of 13 field goal with just 1 of 8 from behind the arc. And then over the last 3 games, he's 5 of 27 from 3 over the last 4 games. So shout out to our guy Ryan for that stat.
It's really rough, man. And great note there from Ryan. 11 points, as Neil mentioned, 5 of 27 from 3 over the last 4 games. Neil, that's kind of the big storyline right now for this program. Simas Lukosius. How does the team get him activated? And overall, for me, how does this team translate what is great energy and action and just, once again, a strong defensive game against a decent offense on the road? How do they translate that to the same kind of energy on offense? And on top of that energy, more so the same kind of focus? That's the big question for this program right now. One that they need to answer against a team bringing in a red-hot Caleb Love in Arizona in just a couple of days.
Yeah, Russ, and it's a big thing to really kind of touch on, obviously, after you watched the game last night. Cincinnati finished the game, Russ, 7 from 19 from behind the arc. Dan Skillings was 3 of 15 on the season from behind the arc, and Dylan Mitchell had only made 2 threes this season, and those were the only 2 threes he made in his collegiate career. So to see those guys bury 6 of your 7 threes last night was something that not many fans were expecting. But if
And
you're
I kind of was like, you kind of wasted it. It's like I don't know if you could expect that. You maybe expect it one more time the rest of the season, but it's not happening probably 2 or 3 more times, and that's a massive kind of swing factor in games that you're not expecting from those guys that are going to be scoring in other ways, but haven't scored like that this year.
Exactly. And especially when 12 of 18 come from behind the arc from Dan. I mean, everybody knows the kind of caliber player Dan Skillings is and the ceiling he has. And the one thing we talked about for him to take that jump was earlier this season, Russ, was to improve that outside shooting. If he shoots from a 50% clip all season from behind the arc, this could be a dangerous team. But for Cincinnati's offense to flow, they got to find a way to get Simas Lukosius the ball. You got to find a way to set something up to get shots there, especially in Big 12 play. Because Russ, you look down at the stats, only one field goal attempt in the second half. That is just not ideal for one of Cincinnati's best shooter, if not best shooter. You don't want to just see him have one field goal attempt in the second half.
And on top of that, Neil, like such little usage, 1 assist, didn't really have a lot of touch time. They
Didn't really impact
took him away at the whole time. He didn't really, and you could feel the lack of ball handling from Simas Lukosius in the turnovers, in the kind of just jumpiness, the over-energized possessions. Are you with me on that, Neil? Where it just felt like things never really got settled down into a rhythm offensively, and it was largely because it felt like they were playing 4-on-5 most of the night because they were just completely shutting down any access to Simas.
Yeah, essentially. But on top of it, when you turn the ball over 15 times as well, in a game you lose by 3, that definitely plays a factor into it too. But Russ, Kansas State was led from the jump. It was basically start to finish this one. Cincinnati only led for 24 seconds in this game, and I believe that was early in the second half. Yeah. So overall, Cincinnati had a lot of things to clean up. But what you do like to see from games last night, Dylan Mitchell continues to be a huge factor on the glass, which is what many people expected him to do. His third double-double of the season, 15-11. Russ, I thought Aziz Bandego played very well last night. Arguably another one of his best games of the season, especially on the defensive end. 9 and 9. You look down, you see those kind of numbers.
3 or 4 fouls that weren't called on Aziz that should have been called, and a guy who's worked so hard on his free throws, he's probably putting up 12, 13 points in this one if they're called. And what is it, Neil? It's a 3-point deficit. And it's like you don't want to talk about the refs as much because UC definitely didn't play in it well enough to earn a win in this game. But there was a lot of contact, and UC only shot 7 free throws. That's all we got to say about that. That's
a lot of contact.
The numbers don't really play out what we saw with our eyes last night or from 7 to 9 p.m.
No, most certainly. The numbers are definitely skewed a little bit. But Russ, on top of it, I mean, Cincinnati just had no answer for Coleman Hawkins and Doug McDaniel. And for those who followed the podcast last week, you and I both broke Coleman Hawkins down. There is a reason he was arguably the most sought-after player in the transfer portal this season. And Russ, it was kind of funny because I was looking at my mentions last night. I can't remember who said it. But after Coleman Hawkins, after the game, someone was like, was this kind of performance expected from Coleman Hawkins? Yes. The answer is yes. Everybody knew what he was like on the defensive end. But Russ,
especially we kind of, I think, maybe underestimated the week off for Kansas State as well to get his knee healthier, to get him a little bit healthier. He looked pretty healthy, Neil. I mean, he looked like a guy who's making 7 figures in NIL and being paid the right way.
100% looked like an NIL money. But on top of it, Doug McDaniel, the Michigan transfer, was just too much to handle for Cincinnati as well. I thought Day Thomas and Jizzle James didn't have their best performances. Jizzle James had a great night, though, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. But on top of it, Doug McDaniel, a veteran point guard from Michigan transfer, he was just doing a great job, Russ, at breaking down Cincinnati's defense to find ways to get
That was the toughest part to see was how easily their best players scored. Did a great job taking away everybody else for the most part, beside Gassan, who we said could be a problem, and he made a couple key big buckets down the stretch. But other than that, I mean, they shut down everybody besides those 3, Neil, but you get 37, you get 50 combined points from those 3 players.
Yep.
That's tough. That's tough.
And I mean, especially when you hold Brandon Hawson, who is arguably the team's best shooter, to just 3 points and 1 for 9 from the field, and that was from behind the arc. He went 1 of 8 from deep. Overall, when you hold somebody who's shooting 45% from the field, especially from behind the arc, to 1 of 9, you look down and you're like, oh, all right, that's a good day. And then you look at all the other stats in this one, Russ. 47% from the field from Cincinnati, despite going, 1 of 6 to start the game, roughly. They go 7 of 19 from behind the arc. You look down, the difference, Russ, is those 15 turnovers resulted in 15 points for Kansas State in a game you lose by 3. If you cut those turnovers down to 11, or heck, even 12, this game could be different.
I'm with you 100%, Neil. And is there anybody off the bench that's going to give them a spark here? We haven't seen a whole lot of that in these big games so far. There's a lot of time. Like I mentioned, I mean, they played two true road games. You and I we were there for the in Northern Kentucky game, and it was pretty split. I mean, for the most part, that was a pretty split crowd, and it's right there across the river. So you put up 60 against Villanova, you put up 67 here against Kansas State on the road, and you don't get a lot of bench action from either games. Can anybody start to step up? A Tyler Betsy, can he start to show why he was so highly coveted and impact? It's asking a lot out of a freshman, but he's been highly touted by Wes Miller and this coaching staff as a guy who's going to make an impact in this conference slate. We'll see if that can happen soon. He didn't do much of anything in this one. 0 points, 1 shot, 6 minutes. Arrington Page, 1 point.
Hickman,
like you mentioned, Hickman, no points, 0 for 2 from the floor after coming back from injury. They get 28 combined minutes, Neil, from the guys outside of Day Thomas from the bench, and it's just a lot of nothing. You get 1 point. You got to get more than 1 point out of those 28 minutes, and we'll see if that can start to develop. Obviously, tough for Tyler Betsy. You're going into the Octagon of Doom. It is the first really, really hostile road environment. It's a Kansas State team, Neil, that was 6-5. I think you and I underestimated a little bit the desperation here of wanting it more, of clearly wanting it more in the beginning of the game, coming out and getting that early lead, getting what were they? They led by 9 or 10 points at one point early in the first half. So how can this team once again translate what was great defense? I would say for most of the game, they played really good defense, possession to possession. I really liked what I saw energy-wise on that end. To focus offensively, it's a few $1 million question for Wes Miller, because that's what he's getting paid each year, and it's obviously it would be solved by him if he knew the answer and we knew the answer. But it's just, Neil, these games in the Big 12, Coleman Hawkins, Doug McDaniel, perfect example. With the way the transfer portal is these days, with the way college basketball is these days, is this high level of a conference, the talent is going to be mostly even for Cincinnati against any opponent they play the rest of the season. It's about who wants it more, who wants to dial into the details more and be the most disciplined outfit, as you mentioned, and as we've highlighted with the 15 turnovers, a very uncharacteristic mark for a UC team that, I'll go ahead and pull up the national stat real quick when I toss it off to you. It takes care of the ball very well against what we've seen as a bad schedule so far this year. Can you dig deep and figure out a way to take care of the basketball and execute offensively once this schedule starts heating up, a schedule that's now entered the top 300 nationally for the first time this season on Ken Palm's overall strength of schedule rating? And this Cincinnati at 245 nationally in overall strength of schedule after facing Kansas State. Neil, they got to be more disciplined on the offensive side of the ball, and I think on top of that, by being more disciplined on that side of the ball, it will breed guys off the bench making a bigger impact. And if you got guys off the bench making a bigger impact, what does that do? That takes pressure off your ball handlers, takes pressure off the starters, takes pressure off the rest of the offense, and it makes you less susceptible to turnovers.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ, too. And it's also worth noting, I was just looking at the minute log from last night compared to the season. Day Thomas played a season high 27 minutes last night. Previous season high was 22 versus Xavier and 22 versus Villanova. So overall, safe to say that foot's kind of healthy and that minute restriction is lifted for Day Thomas. Yeah. But like you mentioned,
and that was a shortened rotation yesterday, and it's still even shortened on that rotation. Day was the only guy off that bench that really did anything.
Yeah,
but Day needs a shout out. He played pretty well offensively. 9 points, 4 of 8, had 4 rebounds, 3 assists. He made a solid impact.
And just 1 turnover as well.
Yeah, but he was the only guy, Neil, really getting to the basket, slicing, and like able to create off the dribble and get home off the baseline.
Yeah, and Kansas State's baseline defense was atrocious. I thought if they really got downhill in attack, they probably could have had a different outcome in this game. But overall, they're going to need production off the bench. They're going to need something from Connor Hickman, Tyler Betsy. Wes Miller has been very adamant about how special of a player Tyler Betsy is, and we've seen it in practices. We've seen the shooting abilities. We know what he's capable of. But on top of it, Wes Miller has been very adamant that Tyler Betsy is going to be an impact player come Big 12 play this season. He's been saying that since Tyler Betsy arrived on campus. But for Cincinnati to be successful, they're going to need great performances or contributions from Hickman, from Tyler Betsy, from Arrington Page, a couple of those other guys off the bench, especially into the Big 12 play, Russ, because like you mentioned, the depth only gets deeper in the Big 12. I mean, you look at the gauntlet that Cincinnati has in the next 2 weeks. I mean, you have Arizona on Saturday, you have Baylor next week, and then you turn and you have a top 10 Kansas team all within the next 2 weeks. Depth is going to be tested early in the Big 12 slate. And this is, frankly, Russ, the slate that could determine everything for Cincinnati's NCAA tournament run.
No doubt about it. Take a quick break, get to that turnover stat that is obviously uncharacteristic from the Bearcats, given what they showed yesterday compared to the rest of the season so far. Right here on Bearcat Blitz. Bearcat Blitz rolls on after a 70-67 loss by the Cincinnati Bearcats to Kansas State, a team that, Neil, they were 8-1 against all time entering this game, and they fall to 8-2 after a home win against Kansas State last season. In another, Neil, it's going to be, we're not going to be, I don't think we're, non-conference, there was a lot of submitting the stories early, getting those done. You're ready to fire those out right after the press conference. Just
not going to be many of those in the Big 12 play.
There's going to be a lot of post presser writing, as for good reason, because these games are going to be a lot better, a lot tighter as they were on Monday night. 70-67 loss, and Neil, a loss that we mentioned could have been much different had 2-3 turnovers gone Cincinnati's way. A Cincinnati team that I mentioned was very solid turning the ball over this season, just 26 nationally in turnovers per game at 9.83 overall, and I believe that's with the game last night added in, so they were even better. They were near the top 20 coming into it, just completely uncharacteristic. And it was kind of evident in Wes Miller's post-game comments on 700 WLW. He was like really angry, but I think more so confused at like just how some of those turnovers happened, just unforced, uncharacteristic. And he mentioned the screen game as well offensively. Their inability to screen Simas Lukosius open, their inability to set hard screens and just be focused on that front offensively was a huge hamper in this game. Overall, though, Neil, tying up the reaction and analysis on this one, 70-67. You love what you see from Dan Skillings. I think that was the biggest positive takeaway from me, and what you saw from Dylan Mitchell. Like, if those shots can start falling, the strokes look good from those guys. They were wide open. They're going to get those opportunities more the rest of the season. Then it can be the elixir to open up this whole thing and maybe get Simas Lukosius going as well. And you got 3-4 shooters out there to go with a lob threat, Aziz Bandago. That's going to get opened up even more because of those opportunities outside. Then I think that's the biggest silver lining to take away from this game offensively, is maybe those two forwards can spark this shooting kind of hot game and do a hot streak to start Big 12 play and open things up that way.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And I mean, you look at the shots that Dylan Mitchell made last night from behind the arc too, Russ. Both of them were kind of a similar set action. I mean, you saw the kind of dribble drive and Mitchell floated to the corner, and he's a lefty. So obviously that was the corner that he's most comfortable with. But if they can start burying those shots from behind the arc, a lot of things are going to open up for Cincinnati for sure. But it's going to be interesting to see how teams start defending Cincinnati, especially when you have a team, Arizona, Baylor, Kansas. It's going to be interesting to see how Cincinnati or how those opposing teams play Cincinnati in the upcoming weeks. But Cincinnati, it's going to be battle tested, to say the least, Russ. And I think you and I have mentioned that from probably since the end of last season, once this schedule came out, that we knew this was going to be a gauntlet to start the season.
Right, Neil. It's It's not like Saturday is a must win or anything like that, but losing this game to Kansas State, which we previewed as probably their easiest road, it's their easiest road game.
Yep.
It's their easiest road game of the season. Like it definitely is. So you could say maybe Colorado is easier, but the Buffalo,
Colorado played Iowa State real tough last night on the road.
Right. And you're at altitude in Boulder. I'm not going to say that's easier than Kansas State. So this is a total missed opportunity here for the Bearcats to put themselves in a good position, to give themselves some breathing room. And now you don't have to beat Arizona, but starting 0-2 in conference is going to put a big damper on what was the best non-conference run at 10-1 in the past decade for this program. We'll see if they can respond. We'll get to it on Thursday or Friday, but we'll save the predictions for then on the basketball front against Arizona. Take a quick break here and get to the transfer portal quick nuggets to close out the show here on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, football has not added a talent in the ensuing days from our last show, kind of reassessing and evaluating what the transfer portal haul has brought so far. But we have news of a running back visit from 24/7 Sports' Chris Hummer. He reported Duke transfer. Star Thomas is going to be visiting Cincinnati soon, is what he said. That didn't really specify any clear date. And then we also had William and Mary cornerback Sasha Garcia get an offer from Cincinnati. FCS freshman All-American this past season, 10 pass breakup, 6'2", 185 pounds is Garcia. We'll get to him in a second, but Star Thomas could be a very solid ad, Neil. I would be very, very much on board with this signing if they're able to pull it off. 6'10", 210 pounds, 1 year of eligibility left, 535 snaps in 2024. So a guy coming off a full, fresh, nice year of experience, 70.7 PFF grade, ran the ball really well, 213 carries for 871 yards, and added another 20 catches for 153 yards. A lot of good, just kind of third, fourth, fifth gear ability, can burn you down the sidelines, has solid size. I don't know if he could maybe handle the workload that Corey Kiner handled last year, but bringing in a Star Thomas and maybe adding 3, 4, 5 maybe carries a game to Evan Pryor's workload, 4 carries a game to Evan Pryor's workload, I think could even it out enough to where Star Thomas is utilized to the maximum effect to mix the lack of fatigue and keep that burst going that I've seen in multiple highlight tapes, and just looking at what Star Thomas could bring to the table for Cincinnati. I would love this addition to the running back room for the Bearcats.
Yeah, Russ, I'm right there with you. I would love this addition for Cincinnati. Obviously, you look down at Star Thomas, 6 foot tall, 210 pounds, as you mentioned, 210 carries, 871 yards in 2024. He's not your big bell cow back who is 220, 225 pounds like Corey Kiner was, but this is a guy who can play through contact and really be a good addition for Cincinnati. He's only got 1 year of eligibility left. That's worth noting too as well, because he started his career at New Mexico State before heading to Duke in 2024. But you look down, Russ, I mean, he's got the experience, especially when you see 213 carries in the ACC. Obviously had a very productive year, 871 yards, but Cincinnati is looking to add that bell cow back alongside Evan Pryor, because like you mentioned, Russ, is Evan Pryor going to be that guy for Cincinnati that can withstand 20, 25 carries a game for Cincinnati like Corey Kiner was able to do? Now, it's possible. We saw what Evan Pryor is able to do with the ball in his hands, but being a smaller back, more let me get in the open space and use my speed and burst by you and my explosiveness, Cincinnati is going to need a bell cow back, a big bell cow back behind him to get those extra yards in those tough and third and short situations. Yeah. Or those tough.
How much do we think Chance Williams factors in this year?
That's a good question. That really is a good question. Obviously used the red shirt last year, so it could be a good question.
Do they go like a 3-headed running back approach and maybe mix him in more? And because they haven't really hit it hard for a running back. This is really the big. I mean, Hosley they wanted to get out of Penn, and now they've kind of shifted focus, it seems, to Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too, Russ, because you mentioned they have multiple different options there within that running back. Jakarian Coffey was their big running back in last year's class. He's a big fella too. Now it's going to be considering, do we see him in the fold in 2025 if they aren't able to land somebody in the portal? But Chance Williams, do we see more Manny Covey? Obviously, Manny Covey and Evan Pryor are kind of similar running styles, but it's going to be interesting what Cincinnati does there in the running back room. Obviously, I would expect them to get a back in the portal, but it's going to be interesting. It's worth noting that Chris Hummer did report that Star Thomas is going to visit UC and UCF, so it sounds like it's going to be a two program race from that report, but it's going to be interesting, Russ. It's really going to be interesting to see what does that running back room really look like. So spring ball is right around the corner, and it's going to be a fun time to watch there. It's definitely going to be different without seeing Corey Kiner in Cincinnati gear and pads, but it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that running back room.
Right there with you, Neil. A interesting development for sure, and one that could maybe solidify what I think it would solidify. I think it's Star Thomas that solidifies the running back room, because you also you don't want to bury, I would think, guys you've recruited and are expecting to continue rising. There's only so many reps that can go around in spring ball and open practice. So we'll see if they get that done with Star Thomas. And then in the cornerback room, we're talking about Sasha Garcia. Matthew McDoom obviously added. That was the addition a couple weeks back, and Garcia now on the radar as well. 73.1 PFF grade in 2024 on 620 snaps, so a ton of experience last season as a freshman, redshirt freshman, I believe. Yeah, holds 3 years of eligibility and had 19 total tackles with 10 pass breakups. Did not tally an interception, but you're okay with all the metrics besides the traditional interception note there. 6'2", 185 pounds, good measurables in that sense, Neil. 6'2", 185 with that kind of production as a freshman. He's a sought after right now if you look at his offers, and somebody that would be, I think, a strong addition to Cincinnati, and a player that I would also think solidify their cornerback room wholeheartedly in terms of their comfortability with the depth, and probably having McDoom, Jordan Robinson, and Sasha Garcia be your top 3 corners at the start of the season, that you would think, if they stay healthy.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And if they are able to land Sasha Garcia, that would be a huge thing. But you look down at where his offers are coming from, especially over the recent days, Russ. He had a lot of smaller offers at first, but now in the recent days, you look down at his offers. As of December 28th, he reported an offer from Maryland, Western Kentucky, Cincinnati came in on the 29th, Wisconsin came in on the 29th, Syracuse came in last night, Wake Forest comes in this morning. So the offers are starting to ramp up for Sasha Garcia now. 6'2", 185, as you mentioned, with those kind of numbers that he had this past season, could be a very good addition for Cincinnati. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. But it's going to be a fun development, hopefully.
No doubt about it, Neil. We have seen ultimately a decent amount of portal additions. 9 so far? We're nearly up to 10 on that total mark. And Cincinnati has kind of dialed in some more targets. We'll see if they can get it done. I think most notably, Neil, I believe the portal closing today. Is that
it closed the 29th and it reopens the 4th?
There you go. Yeah. So the portal's already closed, opens the 4th. No additional UC players have gone in, and we'll see if maybe 1 or 2 more do, but it's a great sign. I think the guys that they've lost, Neil, as we've mentioned, 1 player has gone to a power conference. Other than that, and that's Jordan Young, a guy that you probably wanted, most likely talent-wise, would have wanted to keep, but we're not able to get that done in terms of being on the same page, or however that relationship broke through. Other than that, it's been a very solid retainment period on this side of things for Cincinnati in terms of keeping their freshmen from the first couple of classes under Scott Satterfield and being able to continue developing those classes moving forward.
Yeah, no, most certainly. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, transfer portal is a crazy environment, but with things starting to ramp back up, obviously there's 2 windows of the transfer portal. Obviously, this one's just closed for the holidays right now. We'll be back here in the next probably 4 or 5 days. It'll open up, but it's going to be interesting because, Russ, for those who remember last year, we spoke about it last year on the show. They're arguably their biggest commits in 2024, and Jake Golday and Joe Royer came after the new year. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens after the new year.
And then it's winter workouts and building up the strength for what they're hoping to be a bowl run in 2025. We'll be covering all that and more in 2025. It should be a really fun year. Neil and I will have you covered on all the Bearcats athletic action. I know Bearcats fans, and I would love to cover a March Madness run for this basketball team and then a bowl berth this time next year, covering a bowl game. That'd be a good way to cap off the postseasons in the respective big sports for Cincinnati athletics. It's been Bearcat Blitz presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Russ Eltman. He's Neil Meyer. Have a great new year, everybody.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. Yes!